It's the first ever. Now, my name is Abna Adumasika, and I am a consulting member. I am a member of the consulting team here in Deloitte in Ghana, and I'm going to be the host for today's event. Now, I'd just like to take you guys through a few of our housekeeping rules. But before I do that, I'd like to tell you something small about what today's event is going to be about. Now, I know that everybody who is here on this call has a very, very brief or some sort of knowledge about what grant management is about. Now, here, we are going to be highlighting a number of the challenges and then the requirements that people who are interested in managing grants, people who are receiving grants, and then people who give grants need to look at. We are going to distill through a number of processes that people need to go through in the grant management life cycle. And we have experienced panelists who are going to talk us through all of the concerns that people may have. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat box. And when it comes down to the Q&A or the questions and answers sections, we'll take time to go through each and everybody's questions. Now, I'll take you through our housekeeping rules. I need everybody to be aware that this session is being recorded, and following the event, it's going to be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. So if you need to have access to it at a later date, you can have access to it. And in order for us to avoid any distractions, I'll entreat everybody to mute your microphones, especially for the panelists, and make sure that you put your hands up if you have any questions at any point in time, and we will unmute your mic for you to allow you to ask your questions. And once again, I'd like to reiterate that we are inviting all of you to put out your questions and then any comments that you have in your chat box, and we would attend to them as and when the need arises or as and when time allows. And following the webinar, there's going to be a survey link that will be put in the chat box that you would need to, provide feedback to us on how the webinar has gone and whether or not this has been insightful for you at the end of the webinar. Now, without much further ado, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our Deloitte Consulting leader and the leader for our government and public services industry team, Mr. Roland Bartey, to give us a welcome address. Hello, Roland.
Hi, Abna. Thanks so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Basically, it's my utmost pleasure to welcome everybody to this exciting and thought-provoking webinar. Today, the webinar is about the future of grants management, and with specific emphasis on us looking at looking at surviving and thriving, on how businesses can adapt to the rapidly changing grants management landscape. I'm also humbled to have on this platform, panelists with varied expertise to share their thoughts and insights into grants management as we try to delve into the various trends and transformative, elements that are happening around grants management. But before we get to, the various, topics and the keynote addresses that will come after, I think it's important to kind of set a bit of context to this webinar by highlighting some of the key challenges that we have observed over time as we've been involved in a number of grants management and engagements. One of the things that we've observed has to do with the extent to which grants management requirements in most cases appear not to be streamlined. Therefore, when a grantee is trying to access a grant, there's always a hurdle of not being sure what he or she needs to put together. And in some instances, you might find yourself where even the implementing agency is not able to kind of give a clear perspective on what the grantee needs to do in order for him or her to meet the needed requirements. Another thing that we've observed over time also has to do with transparency. Whenever it's about grants, people are begin to ask themselves, well, if I apply, would I get the money? What shows that those grants is not really kind of earmarked for somebody else to get. So the question is, how do we become more transparent? How do we address the issue of transparency, which kind of also dovetails into communication in terms of how much information is put out there, for grantees to have access to. And when you talk about information as well, it also also looks at the part of the fund manager as well, and also on the part of the implementing agencies as well. Another challenge again is where you look at the extent to which the issue of duplications and overlaps and fragmentations are also addressed. You might find 3, 4, 5 grants all seeking to achieve the same impact. Sometimes sitting with different implementing agencies or organizations, or be even NGOs. And these grants are not speaking to each other to find a way of having a synergy to ensure that they are working together to achieve the same impacts which they're all looking for. Therefore, sometimes you have the issue of double counts here and there, because the same beneficiary ends up benefiting from each of these implementers, because some implementers are looking for very quick wins. Then the issue of internal controls and oversight. From a grants manager side, ensuring that you have proper internal controls to make sure that you're not, missing any step, ensure you're being compliant with the requirements of the funding agency. Also, same on the part of the implementing agency as well. Having a good understanding of the PAD or the project appraisal documents that you have, having an understanding of the PIM as well as the project implementation manual, to make sure that you are falling in line, you're ensuring that you are not doing anything that would later, generate other issues that you go on to, let's say, a midterm review or year-end review of the program, and you have so many questions that you're unable to explain. Then we have the issue of governance, and ensuring that the fund or the grant is being governed properly. The necessary levels of authority, the necessary levels of oversight, are being looked at, and this is also sometimes an issue that most of the grants that are managed face. You have instances where you have all kinds of levels of bureaucratic structures, all in the name of ensuring governance. But at the end of the day, these things also end up creating bottlenecks that does not allow the process to flow. There's also the issue of efficient and effective due diligence, and when it comes to this one, someone might probably beginning to look at the grants manager in terms of to what extent are you ensuring that you're doing proper due diligence on the people applying for the funds, to ensure that at the end of the day, when the money is given, these people are able to apply this money to do what you need them to do, and also you are able to measure the kind of impact that you need to measure. So these challenges, about 7 of them, which I've kind of spoken about, all comes together for us to also now begin to look at. We're talking about the future. We're talking about digitization and technology advancement. To what extent, both from the implementation partner's perspective, both from the grant manager's perspective, and even from the funding agency or the donor who's giving the money, to what extent are we incorporating technology into the grant management process as part of steps in helping us to address some of these issues that I've highlighted above. So to kind of set the context, I've tried to bring up these challenges So as we go through the presentations and then the panel discussions, we'll try to see how, some of our, suggestions and comments will aid in addressing some of these issues. So with this said, and we are looking forward to a very exciting and very interactive engagement, I'd like to use this opportunity to welcome our keynote speaker in the name of Mrs. Kosi Yankee Aye, who's the CEO of the Ghana Enterprise Agency.
Mrs. Kosi Yankee Aye is the first person and woman to lead the Ghana Enterprises Agency, an agency under the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Her mandate is to strengthen and grow entrepreneurs and micro, small, and medium enterprises in Ghana. Kosi graduated from Harvard Kennedy School, USA, with a master's in public administration and certificate in public policy. Kosi Yankee has had over 18 years experience in the USA, Europe, and West Africa. She started her career as an investment banker at Deutsche Bank on the Wall Street, New York. At Deutsche, she worked in establishing the first multi-million-dollar microfinance fund set up by an investment bank. Over the years, Kosi has founded and led the strategic development and growth of various ventures and projects for both international and local partners in finance and agriculture. Through her experience, she has developed a deep understanding and knowledge of finance, entrepreneurship, MSME development, policy development, project design, implementation, and fundraising. Currently, she serves on the board of the Ghana Enterprises Agency, the Venture Capital Trust Fund, and on the advisory board for the Ministry of Finance Ghana, which she has served for 2 terms. She also sits on the steering committee for the Rural Enterprises Program, the Skills Development Fund, amongst many others. She has given many keynotes at numerous conferences across the world and launched in 2017 the maiden Harvard Africa Alumni Forum held in Ghana.
Okay. This is Kosi Yankee Aye. The floor is all yours. I think you're on mute, so.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, can you hear me?
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here today to talk about a very important topic that is very dear to my heart, the future of grants management. I was very happy when I was told that I have to talk about my story, which is the story of the Ghana Enterprises Agency and what we've been able to do over the years to build on various grants programs and how we've been able to organize ourselves to actually also build the grants programs that we've been working with here. So to really start off on that, the Ghana Enterprises Agency used to be the National Board for Small Scale Industries, really set up to build the capacity of the micro, small, and medium enterprises. And when I took up the office in 2017, there was very little work being done to build on grants programs. There were some grants programs, but very limited in what it was able to do. But we realized that to be able to support government and to be able to grow and to be able to support the work we were doing to build MSMEs, then we needed to be having more conversations with partners. We needed to be able to also see how we could build the capacity of our staff to be able to receive these grants and to use that to grow the businesses that we've been working with. So our journey has been quite interesting. For a lot of people, when they hear about the grants programs or working with various donor partners, the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, is that free money? Without realizing that there's so much more that goes into the provision of these grants, and that there's so much that needs to be done in terms of managing. And I think Roland has spoken about looking at it from the perspective of even the governance side, the structures, the units, the developments and the tools and the management documents that really guide these informations and move it, gets the work done. So really a lot goes into it, and it's not what people would usually think and say this is grant funding and building on it. But does it make impact? One of the questions that a lot of times we ask ourselves is that when it comes to the grant funding, is it doing a lot of the impact? And it is. And is it worth it? Yes, it is. I mean, now when you look at the number of work we are doing and how we are building on it, 50% of our budget is grant funding. And it started when we came in and realized that what was the vision and the direction of the institution. Our goal and our direction was to create 1 million plus jobs, because job creation was at the heart of the work that the president was looking at and was really directly in alignment with the Ministry of Trade and Industry. To be able to reach those numbers at sustainable levels and sustain the work, then grants had to play a major role. Now, if you look at now and understanding the importance of grants and you look at the future, then there's still the need for us to build, because the numbers when it comes to, especially when I take the context of the work I'm doing, which is creating jobs and supporting the MSMEs, then there's a huge future for grants management, and there needs to be a new way we look at how we do the things that we've done. So we started through with receiving minor grants, and then what happened eventually was that if we were going to reach the targets, then there were so many things we needed to do. One, change the way we govern and actually structure these grants, because the structures had to fit in within the setup that we had. Then we also realized that, do we have the capacity internally to actually be able to manage these grants over time? And year in, year out, a lot of the questions have been, is there capacity within the service? Is there capacity within our offices to be able to push and drive government's agenda and drive the nation's agenda when it comes to being supplemented by grants? And yes, we realized that we had some gaps which we needed to fill as an institution. And so we had to make the case for that. But be able to fill that capacity gap and build on that capacity gap, and realize that the internal capacity needed to be strengthened. You also needed to understand that before you actually manage these grants and even seek or search for these grants, do you have a plan? Do you have a strategic plan? And I remember very well, we went out to seek for funding and support. At that time, BUSAC, Danida, to get support, not financial support, but actually technical assistance support, which is another form of grants received, to be able to design the strategic plan that would build the institution on which was hinged the transformation of that institution. So when I talk about the impact and the looking at grants and the future of it and the importance of it, even for government institutions who then go on to transform the public-private sector, there's a huge need for that. So one of the major things was looking at how do we build on what we already had existing? How is it that we build our strategic plan? What then do we internally put in place to create a transparent process? Because for grants management,
challenges. But I think so far I've been enjoying what she's been talking about and pretty much highlighting some of the issues that would love to be able to have some idea of how to address, both as implementing agencies or as fund managers or as you know, from a donor's perspective, in seeing how some of these things will play out. We'll try and get Kosi back, and then once we get it back, hopefully we'll be able to listen to a wonderful presentation and story that she has for us. So what we'll do at this stage is, I guess at this stage we'll call on Benjamin Kofi Kwanzaa. He's a grants management
Hi,
specialist.
I think I'm back on.
Oh, you're back. Great. Please, we missed you, and we want you to continue, please. Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Sorry, I think that there was a challenge with the service as we went on. So yes.
Please, we are eager to hear more.
I'm not sure where we left off, but I was talking about the systems that had to be put in place at the Ghana Enterprises Agency for us to be able to really develop and also receive more funding to support. One, I had spoken about the internal capacity, the need to build that internal capacity within the institution to be able to deliver and implement. The second that I spoke about was transparency and being able to set up the right systems within the institution. And this was a process that we followed. And we intentionally went through this entire process to ensure that we had the systems and we were ready to receive grants support to build the capacity of MSMEs and create jobs. Now, we realized that if we were going to receive larger grants, then certain systems needed to be in place. And that's what led to the massive transformation from the National Board for Small Scale Industry into the Ghana Enterprises Agency, also looking at systems transformation within the institution to be able to move forward whilst having a strategic plan that guided us to be able to support the work that we did. I think, Roland, in your conversation, you'd spoken also about having so many different grants funding, which was going in doing the same thing with no coordination. So then one of the major things we did as an institution was to bring some of the partners and the parties to the table so that we align on what was happening. Because if we wanted to ensure that the grants were supporting the businesses in these times, we all needed to be aligned. And we needed to be able to not waste resources. Because one of the major things we saw was that if we couldn't align and coordinate the sector well enough, then a lot of the resources that came in as grants was going to be wasted. And so we needed a unified strategy and a unified voice and everyone at the table to allow us to make sure that the grants and the support we had were being spread across the various institutions and the various parts of this nation that needed the right support for it. So we've had experience in attracting these funds because we put in place the systems and the plan for it. And to date, we've been able to actually attract over 1 billion cedis in funding to support the work that we have done. And this is also in alignment with what has happened in the world. I'm sure we all know that in the past few years, the world has changed drastically, right? So it changed from what we knew. It even changed the face of grants management and grant support from what it used to be. And now for us to keep in mind and the focus of thinking about COVID, the pandemic, thinking about what is happening in the world and the need to build and support the private sector and MSMEs so they can continue to be the engine of growth for the nation. So if you pay attention to the future of grants management and the future of where grants are going, a lot of it is moving towards building and supporting the capacity of MSMEs and supporting these SMEs to grow, to take up the gaps that we were all exposed by due to the COVID pandemic, as well as the current Ukraine crisis that is happening, and really bringing about a lot of instability across the world. So all this experience, all of this allowed us to attract. Now, attracting is one thing, managing is another thing. By then, we had built internal capacity to be able to manage these funds and to be able to deploy them in a timely fashion. Because the bigger challenge also for a lot of funders and donors when they provide grant funding is, are you going to really deliver this in a timely fashion? And it's important to know that when these funds come out, it's supposed to solve and address a challenge and an issue. So if you're unable to meet the needs of the people who need the support, then you've made or you've lost out a lot on the work that you're doing. And so when grants are coming in more and more, gone are the days when you'd have a lot of these grants funds go back. It's important as businesses or as public sector or government to ensure that we have the plan, one of which you spoke about in terms of the project implementation manuals ready, putting in place the documentation to quickly roll out, really engaging the stakeholders who would benefit from the program, because people always feel because you receive the grants management, it doesn't really apply to others, but only applies to you. But there's so many stakeholders who you need to bring on and support with it. So over the years from Ghana Enterprises Agency, we've been able to receive some grants funding from the MasterCard Foundation to support under the COVID relief funds, also under the Young Africa Works, because as I've mentioned, youth employment, job creation, entrepreneurial nation, which is the heart of the government's work, more and more is driving us to receive some form of support and grants funding to build the nation and to support and move that forward as well. We've also received some form of grant support from GIZ, from SNV. We've received some support from the World Bank as well through the Ministry of Finance, as well as other partners. And as I mentioned, to the tune of close to 1 billion Ghana cedis, all targeting MSME development. Now, to be able to manage this and to also look at the impact of it on the grants on the ground is very, very important. And for Ghana Enterprises Agency, I pride myself and my staff and my colleagues ourselves in the fact that, one, we're able to deliver on time. Two, no money goes to waste. At least majority of the funding goes, close to 95% of our funds goes tied directly to the beneficiaries in different ways and forms, be it in access to financing, be it in supporting through business development services or capacity development, providing technical skills, providing regulatory support. All these are ways in which we've been able to move a lot of these grant support, and the impact has been amazing. Recently, the UNDP and the World Bank did an impact assessment and realized that through the impact of our work, especially under the COVID funds, we realized a 22% increase in sales of MSMEs that we had supported. It also showed an improvement and a quick uptake of digitization and technology to build the capacity of the work. We also saw that over 100,000 jobs were created, with 700,000 jobs being sustained. And within a short time of 4 years, over 600,000 people in their lives and the lives of their families had been impacted positively through these grant support. And the learnings are quite obvious. That one, we need to focus grants that we provide instead of leaving it open to for people to figure out what are we going to do with these funds. We need to have clear achievements and goals and targets. We need to strengthen our internal controls, strengthen our internal capacity so they can take this up for sustainability. Because we need to realize that even though there are grants funding, after the projects end, the businesses and the work and what we've done continues. We need to realize that in order to put in place those controls, we continuously need to build capacity internally, and we need to prepare and have a plan. For most of the times, people might have the implementation plan, but they don't even implement it. So understanding implementation and how quickly we can prepare this. So the story of the Ghana Enterprises Agency with regards to the future of grants management and even grants management has been successful, built on the fact that systems were put in place with a clear plan and an implementation capacity that no one had at that time to build the MSMEs for us and the private sector. The future of grants management is bright, surviving and thriving, and how do businesses adapt to rapidly changing grant funding landscape? Because now the donors are looking more at how do we have more transparency, how do we have more impact, and how do we use this to change the world, to change the nations, and actually see impact that translates, especially from our side, with job creation. Thank you.
I'm looking at the numbers you're throwing up, and these are very, interesting numbers. I mean, 20% increase in sales of supported MSMEs, 100,000 jobs created, 600,000 families impacted, and I think you also kind of highlighted very important things that I believe if there are some implementing agencies here, I think will be something that will be a useful takeaway, and I'm just going to run through them. One has to do with building internal capacity and internal structures, having a clear strategy in terms of trying to identify what you want to focus on, how you want to get there, and what you need to get there. Transparency, which is at the heart of most funding agencies. Systems transformation, which I believe cuts across, having the right technology, the right support structures, and all of that. And I think there's also something that you also did mention where you talked about, people seeing grants as free money. It might seem free, but there's something that we need from you, which is the impact, because it's the impact which is your repayment requirement. So I think to sum it up, I believe this is quite interesting, and I think what we can say from our end is we're happy to know that GEA is doing fantastically well and creating the necessary impacts that it needs to create within our system. So to move on, we're going to introduce Benjamin, who will talk to us about the legal framework backing grants management. So Benjamin, you are next.
Benjamin Kofi Kwanzaa is a certified grants management specialist, credentialed by the National Grants Management Association in the USA. A certification which recognizes his master-level knowledge and specialty practice in the field of full lifecycle grants management, and most importantly, demonstrates his dedication to the highest standards of competency as a grants management professional. In 2017, Ben was recognized for his outstanding sustained leadership in the grants management field and for executing sensitive and difficult assignments in grants policy or grants administration, and having an articulated vision for grants management professionals. He was the first from the continent of Africa to receive the National Grants Management Association's prestigious Newton Award. He has successfully managed programs funded by USAID, FCDO, the EU, the World Bank, amongst others, with a total funding value of more than $187 million.
Hi, Roland. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. And Kosi, thank you very much for the wonderful keynote address. And I would like to take it up from where Kosi and Roland left off. Funders do not provide financial assistance in a vacuum. There is always a legal framework based on which they provide funding. And if we are going to be able to understand their requirements and not violate them, if we are going to be able to, survive, thrive, and adapt to the changing needs in the environment, it's important that we know what the legal framework is. So the purpose of my presentation is to create the awareness of the legal framework that supports financial assistance. And if you would bear with me for a moment, I'd like to share my screen as I talk about the legal framework. So we're looking at the legal framework backing grants management. And it's important that if you're a grant applicant or a grant maker or you are interested in the grants management space, you have a good understanding of what the legal environment is. Now, as we talk about grants, I would like you to understand that grant is a form of financial assistance. It could be a government grant or it could be non-government. And basically with government grant, we're looking at the main contributor or the source being the taxpayer. And then for non-government, we're looking at individuals contributing. It could be corporate institutions, it could be foundations. Now, if you take a look at what I'm presenting to you today, we said the legal backing. And once there's a legal framework, it means that we're going to focus on government grants. Non-government grants normally would look at the best practices for grants management. But for government grants, we need to look at the legal foundation, the legal basis establishing whatever financial assistance I want to give. And as I talk about government grants, it could be the US government providing financial assistance, it could be the UK government, it could be the Canadian government, it could be the Australian government, whichever government that is providing the financial assistance, there is always a legal framework. We need to understand that legal framework. And there has been a shift over the years as far as grants management is concerned. The governments in various countries, across various countries, no longer would want to disburse funds directly to beneficiaries. They now want to use pass-through entities acting like intermediaries or fund managers. So they pass the funds through them and they deliver the service on behalf of those governments or the public sector. When Kosi was delivering her keynote, she did mention that grants management or grants funding is not free money. So we've moved away from grants being input focused, where you say that you are receiving the grant and it's free money. It is no longer free money. For you to say that once you get the money, there's no benefit in return. It has moved from input focused to output focused. And now governments give you the money on condition that you are delivering the service on behalf of government. With this shift comes with it the need for a framework, a legal framework, which will guide the process, which would also ensure that there is full accountability, ensure that every dollar, pound, or euro is given a job to do, and that the money gets directly to the beneficiary. There's no free money, there's no free grant, there's always something in return, which is the impact that you have to demonstrate. So the legal environment, the legal framework is very, very critical. And I need to tell you that this is an area that is currently in rapid evolution. If we are going to be able to meet the changing requirements of the funders, we need to understand this legal framework. And for the purpose of my presentation, I would like to select 3 countries, and then we get to understand the basis on which they provide financial assistance. I'm looking at the UK, the USA, and then Australia. So take the UK, for example, and the legal framework is the International Development Act. We also have the International Development Reporting and Transparency Act of 2006, and then International Development Official Development Assistance Target Act 2015. And if you take a critical look at the IDA 2002, what is the basis? To provide development assistance. So in my initial intro, I said, funders do not provide funding in a vacuum. And you need to understand the purpose of this act, the purpose of this legislation. And it is what? For sustainable development. And that should lead to poverty reduction. So your grant funding should be able to address the needs of the community? Would it result in reducing poverty? Would it provide humanitarian assistance? If the answer is no, then don't be surprised if you're not successful in getting funding for your activities. Then there's the issue of reporting and transparency, so that when you get a funding, you know you can't just take the grant money and go to bed. You would have to report on how you've used the funds, and you need to be as transparent as possible. Let me move to the US. With the USA, my focus is on federal grants. There are a lot of rules and regulations governing federal grants, and it will be very difficult for any business to get federal grants without averting its mind to the rules and regulations governing that grant. For example, we have Title II of the Code of Federal Regulations, which talks about the uniform administrative requirements, cost principles, and audit requirements for federal grants. So if you want to apply for any grant funding, what are the processes involved, the administrative processes involved? You need to look at the pre-award, you need to look at the award process, you need to look at the post-award process, you need to look at monitoring, how you are monitoring the grant, and also when you close out the grant and finally you subject to an audit, there is this regulation that governs all that. And for those who are interested in seeking USAID funding, you cannot ignore 2 CFR 200 for USAID. There is also the Federal Grants and Cooperative Agreement Act. And this act draws a clear distinction between what a grant is and what a cooperative agreement is. Sometimes we apply for funding and in our minds, we think we're applying for a grant, when in fact, it's a cooperative agreement that you're applying for, and vice versa. So if it is a grant and you don't understand the legislation behind it, you might end up violating the rules. If it's also a cooperative agreement, but you don't know, and you mistake it to be a grant, you might end up violating the rules. So it's important that you understand these rules so you know what a grant is, what a cooperative agreement is, and that helps you to put together a good application. That helps you to understand the requirements of the funding agency. There's also the Prompt Payment Act, and these are just a few of the grant management laws that are available that we need to be abreast with. So Prompt Payment Act is looking at paying contractors on time, so you don't have to delay in payment. So if you have to pay the contractor in, let's say, 30 days, and you go beyond the 30 days, the act imposes a penalty on you automatically. So when you get a grant fund and there's a contractor that you need to pay on time and you're not paying, you'll be in violation. And there's an audit that will always take place. So once they identify and observe these violations, you ain't going to get federal grants. In some cases, you pay some monies and you end up paying to the wrong people, or you pay in the wrong amount. So there's the Improper Payments Act to address those issues. How about closing the grant? There's the Grants Oversight and New Efficiency Act to address expired grants. And then the issue of data, transparency, reporting, and so on and so forth is addressed by the Data Act. So these are some of the rules and regulations that we need to be abreast with if we're going to meet the funding requirements, and if we are going to be able to survive and thrive and even adapt to the rapidly changing grant funding landscape. Let me look at Australia. In Australia, there's the Financial Management and Accountability Act. There's also the Federal Financial Relations Act and Commonwealth Authorities Companies Act and Privacy Act. And then recently, they came up with a grants management framework principles and policies for best practices, and that was issued by the Attorney General and Justice in July 2017. Now, the reason I'm bringing all these across is that financial assistance by governments of various countries are grounded in law. We need to understand these laws, and a good understanding of these laws will provide a basis for which we present our application. We get to understand the requirements involved. We get to, put together, like Kosi said, a strategic plan, a project implementation plan, and all these would have elements of these laws in them once we have a good understanding of what the funders are looking out for. We've gone past the stage where you take somebody's money and then you don't use it. You don't spend the money. You don't account for the money. We've gone past that stage. Again, we've gone past that stage where you complain that funders are not giving you the money, even though you are working in a particular community. They are not interested in the fact that you need money or the fact that you exist. They are interested in your impact. To what extent are you able to demonstrate this impact? If you're unable to demonstrate impact in your application, it will be difficult for funders to give you the kind of money you are looking for. Be well versed in the laws, the legal framework governing the financial assistance that you are getting from these funding agencies. And once you have that good understanding, it will even help you to develop a very good, robust grants management system covering each stage of the life cycle. At the pre-award stage, what and what do I need to put in place? What are the risk assessment requirements? What are the issues that I need to address to be able to attract the kind of funding that I want to get? So we need to familiarize ourselves with the legal environment, and that will help us to survive, thrive, and adapt to the rapidly changing grant funding landscape. So thank you very much for giving me audience.
Okay, Benjamin, thanks so much. I think this is quite insightful, actually very insightful. It also kind of gives everybody a feel of what an implementing agency goes through, especially if, say, you're another one, let's say, applying directly to, say, USAID for grants. It gives you a sense of what Mrs. Kosi and her team will have to go through to ensure compliance in order to be able to get this funds in and be able to pass on to various beneficiaries. Listening to Benjamin reminds me of what a famous TTL said once, that look, what we look at is the procedure and the process, because at the end of the day, that is what we are concerned about, which means that compliance is critical in terms of be it you or being on the side of the implementing agency that has gotten access or has that grant for you to give out. And also, let's say in the event that you are the fund manager and you're also doing this, compliance to relevant laws and provisions are very, very critical when it comes to grants management. And as the grant management process evolves over time, some of these requirements become even more important than ever. Today, if you look at most of World Bank funding and all of that, you find ESG being a critical part of it, as environmental social safeguards being so important in every grant that they seek to give out. And if you do not comply with some of these things, then you find yourself wanted. So having listened to Mrs. Kosi, having listened to Benjamin, I think it's only fair that we bring everybody to the center of this whole webinar and kind of start the needed deliberation for us to begin to look at some critical things that I believe that if we're able to get some expert guidance or expert advice on what we need to do, will be most beneficial to us all. So we've already listened to Kusi, we've listened to Benjamin. So what I'm going to do next is to introduce the other panelists, and then we dive straight into the panelist discussion, and of course followed by the Q&A. So first on my list, I have from the National Grants Management Association. Her name is Tibtaka Kandel. She is the president of the National Grants Management Association.
Tibtaka Kandel is the interim executive director of the National Grants Management Association, NGMA. She joined NGMA in 2021 as the senior director of operations and has held the interim role since February. In her 23 years as an association manager, Taka Kandel has worked with professional membership groups from athletics and the travel and green industries. She is a certified association executive and lives in Taka, GA, a suburb of Atlanta.
So welcome, Tib. We're happy to have you here. Next on the panel, I have Dr. Adetunji Oredipe. He's a senior agriculture economist from the World Bank.
Dr. Adetunji Adeleke Oredipe is a senior agriculture economist at the World Bank. He is presently leading several agricultural projects, including the series of Fadama projects, the Livelihood Productivity and Resilience Support, and the Northeast Food Security and Livelihood Emergency Support Project. A distinguished professional, Dr. Adetunji Oredipe is an alumnus of University of London and Maastricht School of Management in the Netherlands. Dr. Oredipe has taken active part in the successful implementation of several agricultural development projects in Nigeria. He has served as a consultant to many national and international organizations and has distinguished himself as an accomplished project manager. Dr. Oredipe was appointed by the World Bank as the Senior Country Officer at the Nigeria Country Office in May 2009. Between 2011 and 2013, he served as the Senior Technical Advisor to the Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, with a mandate to spearhead the agricultural transformation agenda.
Welcome, Doug. We're happy to have you here. I'm waiting to see Doug's face. Tinev is here. Hi, Doug. Welcome. Happy to have you. What I'm going to do is, yes, thank you. I'm going to now call back Mrs. Kuki to join the panel, and also Benjamin, if you can please. Okay, I can already see Benjamin here. So since I have all four, I think it's only fair to say thanks for accepting the invitation to be on this webinar. I'm sure everyone here is kind of looking forward to a very thought-provoking session, and already I know questions are flying. Some were very specific. Mrs. Chrissy was very directed towards you, so we'll get to that very soon. But I thought it was important, before we get into all the questions, to maybe go to Tib and just ask her to tell us a bit about the survey that was done by the National Grants Management Association, so that at least it gives us a good sense of what the trends are, so that as we discuss, we can kind of align to what some of these trends are saying, and see maybe how far we are off, or how close, or how well we are doing. So Tib, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me today. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about a survey that happens every year, the annual grant survey. We partner with REI and the George Washington University to do this survey every fall, and then the results come out every spring. It is a look at how our profession is evolving as grants managers. And and we're trying to understand what are the challenges that are happening and what are the changes that are happening year to year across the entire profession. So that survey is available, and I'll drop in the chat, is on REI's website, as well as there's a webinar that was done earlier this year that went through the results. So definitely we'll make that available to anyone who wants it. But I wanted to just talk about some of the highlights. And a lot of it has already been spoken about today. Obviously, the number one challenge or the number one trend is around compliance. It is the most time consuming, the most difficult part of a grants manager's job. Risk mitigation from the financial and compliance side is the most vital role of grants managers. And that transparency and accountability that Benjamin spoke about earlier is really what makes sure that recipients get to keep their monies and that they continue to receive funding in the future. So that's absolutely important. You heard a lot about the regulations, the many layers of regulations that we deal with here in the US, the 2 CFR 200 uniform guidance. That we have a minimum level of uniformity around grants that are administered, monitored, and reported, but there are always new guidance, new rules coming out. So that compliance piece is just an enormous part of daily work for our grants managers. Oddly enough, however, the survey also revealed that the least amount of time they spend are really evaluating those outcomes. And we've talked a lot already today about how we need to really focus on what our purpose is, being able to clearly lay out what we want to achieve with the funding, and being able to report on those outcomes. That programmatic side is equally important to the compliance side. So I know Benjamin said it. He said measuring and demonstrating your impact is key. And that is something that we need to continue to focus on as grants managers and make sure we put the effort in. The survey looked at adoption of new technology. Obviously, we can see since 2016, I think the survey started, a decrease in hard copy reporting, a move towards a mixture of email and data entry reporting. I would say that trend is even going to accelerate since COVID. Obviously, we're moving further and further into large data entry systems and away from email. Our grants managers are stretched very thin already, so uploading reports by email is something we're looking at ways to streamline. But we are still slow adopters of things like AI and blockchain and other new technologies, but we're getting there.
Thanks, Tim. I think it's good to know that the issues we're identifying here seems to also be the same issues being seen out there, and definitely there's a need for us to pay particular attention to compliance. I mean, if you want to make sure you get your next funding, you just need to make sure that you're compliant, and also ensuring that you are giving back to that particular funding agency the kind of impact that you're looking for. So with compliance and all of that, I think my first question will go to Tunji, where, I mean, Tunji, generally from where you sit, and then having known you and your story of Fadama and all the good things we hear about it, generally, what are the funding requirements, from funding? Maybe you can take it from the World Bank perspective. What does the World Bank really, require, when let's say government in most cases wants to, assess grants from them? What do they really look at?
Thank you, Roland, and thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed this session, from the practical example from COSI and the very, very academic intervention of Tim. From my side, it's going to be a lot of practicality in terms of what we have done in the past. I've been on World Bank job for almost 30 years now, both from government side and working from inside the bank. The latter part of working from inside the bank is just about 30 years. And what I want to say, when anywhere you mention grants, is alien to business management. When you want to do business, it's either you are relying on your own money or you're able to borrow to be able to pay back, which means you must have a very sound business plan that enable you to make much money to be able to pay back the principal and the interest when you have to borrow. So anywhere grant is introduced, there must be a very solid reason. And most of the time is set aside to address certain failure in the system. And let people know, sometimes government even borrow to now give it out as grants to drive such policy. So it's never a free money to the person making it available. It's at a cost to somebody somewhere, even when you think it's a grant to you. And to me, it's not totally a grant because at the end of it all, certain results are expected. So there's something coming out, either at the entry point or at the exit level. Having said that, what kind of failures are we addressing with matching grants, especially given the experience of the World Bank? Sometimes it's about policy or regulatory or even coordination failure. Government decide to intervene when they see things going in the other direction. And to do that, they need to bring some funds. So that is why whatever money is made available to you, you must find out, why is this money coming to me? And what am I supposed to deliver at the end of it all? Sometimes is to address issue of lack of good access to finance, in which case government has to intervene, or some private organization who really want to drive that objective will now say, okay, if the banks are not going to do it, we are willing to do it. So you must prove a point that there is a particular failure. At times, it's about weak human and organizational capacity. Wherever you find this, is the responsibility of a third party to drive that system. And finally, sometimes you want to drive a change. For example, in the agri sector, farmers are used to do certain things certain way. Government think it's irresponsible. I mean, it's not going to give them good results. They want to move them out of poverty. You need to do something extra. So hence the grant. So first of all, you need to understand what is the objectives that we are driving. Beyond that, you need to be able to do serious economic justification. The money will have been wasted if you are not able to show clearly what value this money is going to add. Sometimes it's in terms of economic justification, sometimes it's social justification. The most important thing is that you understand what the people giving the grants are actually interested in. The objectives must be very clear. When you are applying, you must know the objectives of a particular grant. Some grants are just targeting at gender balancing, and you need to demonstrate that. Sometimes they are addressing child issues. You must address that focus. You cannot change the direction of those grants.
Yeah.
The level of matching grants is also important. You need to understand that. Most of the time it is 50-50 because you say it's matching, which means you need to bring in something which this is going to match. And when this matching grant comes, they are going to solve part of the problem. Sometimes it's just to support you to acquire the hardware, the equipment, wherein your more money should be directed to addressing the software, issue of labor, issue of working capital. Sometimes a combination of the two. The grants are permitted to finance part of the other expenses. One other thing is, most of the grants insist on some technical assistance, because each time new funds are brought into your business, we want to drive a change. And to drive that change requires some capacity. So it comes with capacity building, it comes with some technical assistance. You cannot say, okay, I'm interested in hardware, I'm not interested in software, because people who are bringing it knows exactly that the two must go together. So you must be willing to trade in these two areas. Matching grant and your contribution is also very important. So what we need to watch out are those criteria that have been set out. And once you really understand that, you're in good stead to flow with the system.
Thank you, Tunji. And I think you brought up one important thing, where, you know, if we look at our experience in terms of people applying for grants, one of the things we notice they don't do, they'll ask for everything else. I mean, they'll ask for all the equipment, they'll ask for all the working capital, and they will tell you that we are coming up with innovative ideas. But one thing you see them not putting anything for is technical assistance and capacity Development Day. Nobody looks at that. So I think it's quite interesting that we look at, and I think Kosi talked about how technical assistance did help them to kind of mature to where they are today. So Kosi, what I have two questions, but I'm gonna lump them together and just throw them at you. So would like to know, I mean, what are the funding or the grants platforms available in Ghana? So let's say you have people on this call who are looking for funding opportunities in terms of grants. I mean, what are the ones that you know of, or if there are few in West Africa, because we have people from other countries as well joining this call. And probably once you kind of give us a sense of that, maybe you can also tell us how do people ensure that they manage these opportunities properly? I mean, looking at the fact that you have the donor giving you this money, how do you ensure that you manage this? And you can look at it from your perspective, because technically you're like a fund manager, really. Getting your own fund and managing it yourself. And if basically tell us how probably you are doing it, that I believe will be useful to the people on here.
Okay. Thanks a lot for the question. I think there's so many grant opportunities these days, and coming from various dimensions. So for people out there who are looking for various grant opportunities, there are those coming from the public sector, from government. There are also those that are coming through foundations and NGOs these days, trying to support various ecosystems, trying to support various sectors. And so there's so much going on. But I think the most important is information. And I always say, for lack of information, people perish, but people don't know where to go directly to seek information with how or where to get the funding. And I think the other challenge is not just understanding or finding where those grants are, but actually how to apply and how to put in place the right information, or even gather the information that is needed to actually assess or even access these funding. So as much as possible, I always tell people that one, you need to seek the information. Two, you need to be prepared and make sure you have your financials, you have your documentation, because people fail to realize that one thing, no funder is going to give you funding when you've never managed funds before. And so, I mean, you can start small and then build on it, and your credibility and what you've been able to achieve would actually allow you to either grow your portfolio or grow your ability to manage more funding than you've managed before. So it's a process and it takes time, but you need to be prepared to do it. Now, for a lot of other funding as well, making sure you have a team to be able to do it, to deliver, because there's so much that goes into it. We've spoken about the governance side. We've spoken about different information has come through today, but you realize that there's not really the right team to be able to implement. One thing I left out when I was speaking earlier was technology. How do you utilize and really use technology to reach people and to actually get the work done in a more efficient and sustainable way, which is something we've adopted at the Ghana Enterprises Agency. When I look at the current grants platforms, if you look at the work we do at the Ghana Enterprises Agency, we have the new Ghana Economic Transformation Program, which is providing both institutional support by providing technical assistance to SMEs, the high growth SMEs, and also providing access to funding. And all of this is going to be complemented with technical assistance. So we're able to build and grow businesses. And so there's the Ghana Economic Transformation Project 1. There's also the Ghana Jobs and Skills Program, which we've been working on. And that's also coming live in a month or two. And that really looks at government's agenda to create jobs. So if you look at what government is talking about with regards to how do we create jobs, how do we ensure that the teeming youth unemployment challenges are addressed, a lot of these grant funding seeks to address the challenges we're facing in that sector, in unemployment, and trying to turn your youth into an asset instead of a liability, and building on that capacity. And they're both mainly funded by the World Bank. And so this intervention seeks to look at over 50,000 youth, working with them, building their capacity and supporting them. And these are projects we've been working on, we've been building on, and in the next few months or two would go live. We also have what happened when coronavirus, the COVID-19 impact happened. We had some grant funding as well. And that's a platform that is still running as we're building and provided access to financing for businesses. Some have started paying back. And so we're also going to intend to provide that to support more MSMEs, so we build on it. Besides that, there are other funding platforms. We're working with the Germans, GIZ, mostly looking at digitization programs at the We Do program, which is looking at how you use diaspora remittances as a form of access to funding to support MSME development. And so it's quite an innovative way of looking at funding and how to support funding. And so these are ways in which we're building a lot of these programs. And our upcoming, I don't know if you know, Kaizen, which is a Japanese model for accelerating the growth of businesses and improving productivity. And so we have some form of funding coming in to support SMEs to accelerate their growth of businesses and to build productivity. So for Ghana, these are some of the things within our network that is coming up. Even the Youth Start intervention that government has been talking about, where the nation has put the youth at the center of its budget to be able to create opportunities for them and to build on them. Then we have what we work on with the MasterCard Foundation. We have some grant support, which was to build the skills of the youth and use that to translate into entrepreneurial ventures so they can start up and also create employment for themselves and others. So there are a lot of things going on, but this is what we're looking at from the Ghana Enterprises side. Outside of the Ghana Enterprises Agency arena as well, as I mentioned, there are these foundations, the various foundations that are coming up, all with different focus and interests, some looking at SME development, some in healthcare, some looking at different strategy for green SMEs. I just did a keynote speech at the Green SME funding by GIZ, where we've been working with over 100 businesses, looking at how they go green, or those that are green, how do we strengthen that? So there's a lot coming and going on, but how do you manage these grants appropriately? Is really, as I mentioned, to be very clear on what you seek to achieve with each grant is very important. Because if you don't have a clear idea or understanding, you're not going to achieve what you want to do. Then you also need to be able to have a strong team, right, that you can rely on to implement. And timelines. A lot of grant challenges is people meeting timelines.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is with time management and managing work plans that people don't really get. But it's really a big challenge in trying to disburse, trying to ensure the funds are going to the right places. So to be able to manage it properly, you need really tight timelines that you monitor, and it's someone's job, because it's so easy for it to fall through the cracks and not get the work done. Then also minimize, to be able to do it, to minimize having too many meetings around it. Because then you realize that all people are doing is meeting and having conversations about the same thing we talked about forever. And so when you get on the ground, there's no implementation done. So be very clear as to what you seek to achieve, the timelines you're going to achieve it, the people who are going to deliver, and quickly turn around those people who don't deliver and say goodbye, have a great day. To be able to properly manage it and not keep going at doing the same things we've done for many years that haven't succeeded. So there's a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot that can be done to make this a success.
I mean, I think just because you just hit the nail on, on the head. I mean, one of the biggest challenges we've kind of noted has to do with, people appreciating time and the need for things to be done on time, and the need for people to ensure that what they had agreed with the funding agencies or the donors are adhered to. And I'm sure if there are any implementing agencies on this call, the things you just run through are things that I really would expect them to take, have as a takeaway. Because one of the things that most funding agencies don't want is underutilization. Because the moment you underutilize the fund, you more or less distort their indicators. So if you don't go by the times that you're agreeing to get things done, then that begins to create its own challenges. So from here, I think Ms. Kuti has kind of said a lot, but I'm still going to go to Tunji because PIUs and PMUs are critical to address the issues that, you know, Kosi just spoke about. A lot of meetings, you know, today retreat, tomorrow workshop, we are discussing, and you ask yourself, okay, when will the discussion stop? So Tunji, I'm going to direct this to you. I mean, what do you think the role of the PIU or the PMU, which is the project implementation unit or project management unit, or in this case, any implementing agency that has a responsibility of ensuring that, you know, grants are implemented? I mean, what should be their role to ensure that, you know, the programs are successful? I mean, leveraging on what Mrs. Kosi has just highlighted.
Yeah, thank you. This is a very important segment of our discussion because for most of World Bank projects, we work through government to implement the project, and where government also normally establish a semi-autonomous project implementation unit. That's what we mean by PIU, to actually carry out day-to-day activities of the project, including sometimes managing the grant itself. But we have two types, where we use the PIU to manage the grant itself. The other type, which I'm presently going through in Liberia, is where the PIU now outsource the management of the grant component to a third party. In this case, in the case of Liberia, that is what Deloitte is trying to handle for the Ministry of Agriculture through the project implementation unit. Now, where we have the situation that we have in Liberia, where there's a PIU and there's an independent unit that is responsible for managing the grant itself, there's a thin line between what the PIU should concentrate on and what the fund manager should actually be doing. The fund manager takes responsibility for using that fund for the intended purpose. And that is why the money is warehoused with the fund manager. They need to apply all the rules that normally apply to financial management from beginning to the end. That is very key. Now, let me turn quickly to the question. What should PIU be doing? PIU will have been there before the fund manager. Sometimes we use the PIU to even engage the fund manager. So they need to have a good understanding of what the objectives the grant is trying to drive. They need to get involved in the preparation of the manual, which will outline the roles of so many players that will be involved in the grant management process. The PIU itself, the supervising ministry, sometimes there's an independent evaluation committee that will actually do the evaluation before it gets to what we call their fund advisory council, because we are talking about public resources moving out of the system. Some people who should know should get to know. Sometimes the Federal Ministry of Finance will be represented, the Ministry of Commerce, all the key agencies that must know should be part of that. So what is important is that the manual has to be very clear on the rules and the principle that the grant is going to drive. Another important thing we need to get hold on is every other structure that's required for that grant to be managed. For example, sometimes you need to work in the field to support the beneficiaries, those who are going to benefit from the grant. You need to put information out there. You need to even engage service providers who are going to support the beneficiaries to be able to submit proposal to the fund manager. So they need to get on top of this. They need to work with technical to identify potential beneficiaries. Sometimes people are there, they might hear about it, they may not know how to start. So they need to do something extraordinary to make sure that the right people are actually coming up to be part of it. They need to respond to information requests from applicants. Sometimes we don't load all this on the fund manager. Some of them purely financial matter, some bit of technical can go to the fund manager, but the PI itself has to prepare the grants for the fund manager to play their role. They need to look at what are risk assessment. They need to talk about determination, recommend specific award condition for those grants. They need, because they understand the subject they want to drive, they understand the value chain where you are working on certain value chain. So these are areas I expect that the PI should concentrate the energy. Selection criteria was very clear as part of the manual, so that the issue of transparency, the issue of who is getting what, should be very clear at entry. They must put their eyes on achieving the grant objectives. And sometimes it's well defined. We have talked about the kind of failures we want to address, so that at the end of that grant regime, we can sit back and say, yes, we have really achieved all those objectives. And finally, those applicants who actually come out for the grant need to demonstrate that there's no duplication of efforts. It's key. Sometimes about 3 or 4 grants similar in nature, but addressing different things. Government want to reach as many as they want to reach. So we would need to avoid all of that. What we have seen there is what people will call gatekeepers when it comes to grants. Bring 10 types of grants, they know how to write it, they know how to meet the criteria, they know how to get the money. At the end of the day, the objectives of getting everybody to be part of it will be missed. That is very important. And finally, the issue of environmental and social assessment, social implication of what we do is key to some of us who are international donors.
Thank you, Tunji, and I think PIU's role, in addition to what Tunji has said, is ensuring that you familiarize yourself with the project documents, understand what it needs to be done, so that sometimes you get a situation where the grant manager says that I'm not going to do this, and then you get the PIU not seem to understand why you say you're not doing it. You go like, hey, go read the documents that you gave to me, go read the manual you said I should follow. So it's important that when you're in the PIU, you understand the various documents that govern the grants that is being earmarked for disbursement, so that when certain red flags are raised, why they are being raised. There are a couple of questions in the chat box. So what I want to do is I want us to probably look at one more question, which I'm going to throw at Tip and Benjamin. And from there, we'll just go into the chat box and just look at a few of those questions there. So, Cozy talked about technology. Tip, you also talked about technology. So Benjamin, what is the importance of grants management softwares? We have a couple of those softwares, but from your experience, what can it help us address? And Tip, you can support Benjamin on this.
Yeah, thank you, Roland. So let me quickly make some quick contributions with regards to what Kosi and Doc have said. Now, Kosi made a very important statement about you having a previous experience in managing grants before any funder would want to give you grant funding. And people have asked me a lot of questions. If I don't have the experience, what do I do? The answer to that question is collaborate. Donors are now interested in collaboration because it helps you to build your capacity to manage any future grant that will be available. And then the issue of understanding the requirements of the donor is very, very critical. I've managed a grant from a particular donor which had the requirement of you having your forecast to be 99% accurate, which means at the time you are producing the forecast and when they finally disperse funds to you, the variance should not be more than 1%. So if you don't understand this requirement, you're going to run into trouble with the donor. And then the issue of capacity to manage the grant. Do you have the systems in place? And this brings into the issue of technology. Technology or having a grants management system or software is no longer an option if you want to be able to meet the demands and then respond to the changing requirements. If you want to be able to secure highly competitive grant funding and even manage, you should be in a position to track what is going on. So one key issue that comes up with regards to having a grants management system or software is your ability to track whatever is going on. It will be difficult to meet your strategic objectives if you lack the visibility and ability to track who is doing what within the organization. So that grant management system helps you to ensure that you are accountable. It provides alignment with grant activities with strategic goals. The second benefit that we can get from having a grant management software is the issue of having all your data in one place. Everything is centralized. So you don't have to struggle, go look for information from Excel there, Excel here, Excel everywhere. Everything is at a central location. You have access to the information, and it helps you to mitigate financial risks. You avoid audit findings and so on. The other key issue has to do with data standardization. It helps in the reporting process. And there are lots of grant management softwares that can help any organization to do that. I mean, there's not a platform to recommend any, but if you have a very good grant management software, it helps you to track every activity at each stage of the life cycle of the grant, the pre-award, the award stage, the post-award, which deals with financial management and programmatic issues, talks about procurement, asset management, your monitoring, the closeout, and even the audit process. A good grant management system, software will help you in all these areas.
Great. Tip, do you want to add anything?
No, I think Benjamin covered a lot of it, but I do think the other side is there are a lot of new softwares out there and wonderful options in a variety of budget ranges, but you still need to understand your grant. You still need to understand what your reporting requirements are. You have to start from there. No software is going to solve those issues if you don't understand them. So start with a deep understanding of what your requirements are and what your grant requires and what you need to report on, because you're going to have to build your software to match.
I think it's a very, Tip, your last comment is really, really critical, because we know of instances where the number of grants that we couldn't look out there for any software, we just had to build. And there are 2 instances where we had to build specific softwares to ensure that we got the right things done. So let me move into the chat box. So the first one is from Edmund. I think that's for Benjamin. So he wants to know how he can get access to the legal frameworks, the one relating to the International Development Act. So I don't know if you want to post the link here for them, or we can get back to him later, or you want to say now?
Yeah, so I think after this webinar, we're going to reach out to all these attendees. This is not a one-off thing. We want to build a relationship with you. So we're going to share all the information with you. At the end of the day, we want to help you, we want to build your capacity, we want to help you survive, thrive, and then be able to adapt to the changing environment. So we'll share this information with you.
Sure.
And when we share, please read them. They'll help you.
Yeah. The next one is coming from Woke Chahi. I hope I'm getting the pronunciation right, and please forgive me if I'm damaging your name. They want to know, so does grant fund mean giving fund without collateral or any other ways? Because do you want to take this? I would have loved to answer if I'm the host. And Benjamin, do you want to?
I think that.
Yeah. Because please go
Hi.
on.
So the
Hi.
question is, does grant funding mean given
Fund without collateral?
Without collateral? I mean, it depends on the design of the intervention, right? And I think there's no cookie cutter way of doing grant funding.
Yeah.
There's a lot of innovation and a lot of thought that goes into it. So if you're trying to fill a gap or fix a challenge, and collateral is the challenge, then maybe we'll design an intervention that does not include collateral. But it's not only about collateral. And that's one other thing, is that funding is not only about giving money to businesses alone, right? It's technical assistance, it's different types of support as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Kazi. Benjamin, I think I'll give this to Tim. So Tim, someone wants to know, how can I be involved, i.e. to be certified? So basically, I think he's asking about how does he become a certified grantsman. I know it was some things we're going to go in later, but I don't know if you can just quickly speak to that.
Yeah. At National Grants Management Association, we hold the CGMS, the Certified Grants Management Specialist credential. So we are the only certification in the industry right now, and it is not even an easy test, but it is a test. You can take it remote proctored, and it really is designed to make sure that you have intense knowledge of the entire life cycle of grants. So it starts with how federal funds are distributed. It ends with audits and how those funds are reported and managed and reviewed by the government. So it's pretty intensive. We do a 2-day training called the Grants Management Body of Knowledge that is a primer for the certification, but it really goes even deeper into the uniform guidance. And but the CGMS at ngma.org, there'll be information there about what that test is like and what that certification requires.
So I think for Agbenyo and policy analyst, that's the name I have. I think this addresses your question. There's another one from policy analyst. I wish I knew, and policy analysis, I wish I knew his name. They say, why do receivers perceive more that grants are not to be repaid? I think Tunji addressed this one. I think Benjamin, you also spoke about this. This one is just a comment. Doesn't say it's TACA. I think this to you. It says that TACA indicated that non-compliance was a big challenge in grants. An example, a specific non-compliance by grant seekers. So I don't get this. An example, a specific non-compliance. I don't know if he's asking for you to give specifics. Well, so let maybe just to help. For instance, let's take for instance you come for a grant and probably like Dr. already just put it. There's an ESG component and there's all these ESG requirements. So for instance, there are certain herbicides. Let's say if it's agriculture, there's certain herbicides you're not supposed to use on the farm. So if you use those herbicides and in the course of the monitoring and evaluation, it is determined clearly there's a non-compliance issue here. So from the grant seeker side, there's so many ways you can end up being non-compliant, i.e. money that was meant for you to go and buy, let's say equipment, to go and buy a personal vehicle. So there's so many examples, I believe, to this one. How does one become, I think TACA has already addressed that. Okay, so this is Akin. Considering that the corruption indices of some African countries are high, how does this affect the donors' disposition to these countries and grants management in general? Tunji, do you want to take this?
Thank you. Our experience is so that whereas we may be implementing the same grant program in different countries, depending on our assessment of the system, we introduce additional requirement. I've just told you an example where we allow the PIU to manage the fund directly. In some cases, we also have a situation when we insist on introducing fund manager. We also sometimes go beyond that to introduce all sorts of independent assessment along the line, so that before the money is released, you might have crossed 3 or 4 orders in very tough situation. In ideal situation, we want to relax the condition so that the people get the money in good time and they begin to drive the objective. Like, again, another way of ensuring that the results are achieved by building serious monitoring indicators, which also measure different landmarks. We are not going to wait till the end of your project to know how far you are doing. So these are additional measures that we introduce in different situations, but that will not drive away any genuine donor who is interested in development to come to any space.
Thank you, Tunji. So Tunji, I think from there I have another question for you, and I think this is for you and Kosi. And basically, when you talk about grants, people forget that the reasons why sometimes grants are given is because the financial institutions are not willing to provide that needed funding. So access to finance is one of the major reasons. And I'm sure from an MSME perspective, from Tunji, your perspective. So maybe ladies first, so I'll let Kosi start, and then maybe Tunji, you chip in. What role can FSIs actually play in this whole grants management process? Do FSIs have a role? Hello, Kosi, if you can hear me.
Yeah, so for financial institutions, what role do they have in the grant management scheme?
Yes, what role can they play?
I think that they have various roles. We've done it in the past. If you look at our COVID interventions, what we did to allow for deployment was to use the financial institutions to assist us to do the overview of it, to help us. We designed our technology platform in partnership with the financial institutions, because we realized that the numbers that were coming were a lot. And if we're going to push it to the financial institutions, they wouldn't be able to deliver. So we worked with them to design a first step credit assessment in the technology platform. So they played a role there. And then they also played another role of reviewing the applications, right? After it had gone through the steps that we had set up using the technology. So the final step, they did the final overview and worked on it. And that's what allowed us to be able to separate a bit sometimes the public funding and making sure people don't think and look at it only from the lens of, oh, that is government grants funding. So that's where you bring them in as an interface to provide the barrier between the two, and also to do some of the due diligence in support of the work.
So maybe, Kosi, just
Yes.
So I want to have a follow-up question for Kosi, then I come back to you. There's always the situation where, you know, when grants are available and a portion of that is allocated to FSIs, for them to take it up, you know, in trying to help come up with services or products or things that will benefit grantees. Most of them most of the FSIs shy away from it. Would you have a sense of why they shy away from it? Does it just got to do it because maybe the money is not big enough?
No money is small money, you know?
Yes.
Every money is money. So I think it's not the size. I think it's rather competing with their funds, okay? Because in most instances, you go in at subsidized amounts. And so for some financial institutions, they see it as it competing with the funds. Yeah. The other is that there's certain criteria or certain focus that for some of the financial institutions, they are private sector profit oriented. And for a lot of some of these funds, it's also development funding focus. Yeah. And so bridging and marrying the two is sometimes difficult for certain parties. And so sometimes they might shy away from it. However, they always want the money if it's going to be deposited in their account.
Yeah, yes, true. Tunji, can we have your thoughts? Yes.
Yes, that's a very important segment of the discussion too. You know, in the bank, one of the major objectives of introducing matching grants is to crowd in private sector funds and financial institutions. The multi-grant that you are providing sometimes is temporary. You will soon leave the stage. The financial institution have to continue. For sustainability issue, is key that we establish a link between what we are trying to do in the space with the role of financial institution. And in our project, we have identified 4 areas where the financial institutions can play a big role. The first one is sometimes you get the financial institution to provide advisory services because they deal with the issue of funding businesses on daily basis. Some of them have very strong desk to do this. They can get involved in that. The second one is they get involved in managing the grant itself. Sometimes we deposit the money in the bank and then they ensure that the money moves to the beneficiaries. Or sometimes we need to use them to do the appraisal, to do the disbursement and everything that has to do with the grant. So that's another area of comfort for the financial institution. The third one is they are supposed to incentivize to be incentivized to provide credit to finance part of the grant activities. Yeah. For example, where we expect the beneficiary to contribute 50%, they may not have the whole of that 50. But the 50% grants that the donor is giving gives some comfort to the bank that whatever comes, they should be able to make enough money to repay their own part. And the final one is that they like to take the funds and they sometimes we insist that certain proceeds of whatever the beneficiaries actually realize must be saved with the bank so that it helps them to access funds either from the bank itself or from other financial players. So they have a role to play, and that is why in every grant design by the bank, you will see it's more components where we are working with the financial sector. It's the best practice, is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Tunji. So I know people want to ask questions. Of course, not always having to chat. So what I want to do, there are 2 questions I'm going to lump together, which I'll throw that to Tip and Benjamin again, and then from there we'll just allow one of 2 participants to ask questions before we wrap up. So some of the questions that have come up is in terms of people trying to figure out how do they become like certified grant managers. So maybe it'll be good, Tip, if we can, talk a bit about how people can have resources, the needed resources as they aim towards become certified grant managers. And I think that's for Tip, and for Benjamin, you can be warming up. I think we've lost Benjamin now. Oh, he's here. Great. So Benjamin, you can be warming up with this one in terms of being a grant manager, okay, and having managed grants over the years. What would be the one advice that you give to anybody who is seeking to be a grants manager? So Tip, you can start with your bit, and then we can have Benjamin give us that.
Yeah, I will say on the education front, the last 2 years have been a bit of a whirlwind because of the increase of funding. Our grants management community has doubled for NGMA and worldwide. So we have a wonderful challenge of helping a lot of new grants managers in the industry. So, but that means a lot of folks are really starting at zero. So for instance, we do monthly webinars. We've tried to increase our education about tenfold really in the last 2 years to try to accommodate that need. We are doing a new grants managers seminar this fall for the reason of it's funny, Cozy was talking about deadlines. The number one thing we heard of new grants managers challenges were just being able to keep up with all the deadlines and how do you project manage. And so we want to really create some learning around how do you really just start as a grants manager. So that is coming up, like I said, the monthly webinars, and we do an annual training in DC, but we're finding that we need to be able to reach beyond our little community that we built in 1978 and really build more internationally, because there is such a need for grants management across the globe. So we are working in that direction. But also, we mentioned the CGMS, part of our goal too is to acknowledge excellence and to be able to certify that someone really understands the grants world. And so when employers see that CGMS mark, it means that you have a set of skills and expertise that's above the rest. And so that program has really taken off in the last couple of years as grants management has seen this wave of growth. So that is happening, but there is a ton of education out there. Obviously Deloitte, but many of our partners, many of our states, many of our other agencies are doing a tremendous amount of education. Unfortunately, there's no centralized way to find it, but there's a ton of education if you want it out there.
Great, thanks, Dave. So Benjamin, you have 2 minutes, so I can allow participants to ask their questions. So Benjamin, yes, what will be your advice?
Yeah, so the number one thing that I would emphasize as a grants person with my experience over the year is training. That is key for anyone who wants to excel in the grants management space. And most of the times we see finance managers managing grants, but then we need to move a step further, go beyond the financial management component. Look at the entire life cycle of the grant. I mean, the pre-award, the award, post-award, close-out, audit, have a full understanding of the entire process. And for me, training helped me to, lift up my game. So I'll always emphasize training. If it's possible, I mean, get certification. The certified grants management specialist is key. And that is what has helped me over the years. And without the training, I wouldn't have been able to manage funds to the tune of $187 million. So I'll emphasize training. Never lose sight of that.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you. Tip, were you going to say something?
Yeah, and I just wanted to, on that note, we are dealing with a lot of that in states, as money used to flow primarily to the states and then lower into the municipalities and the counties. And with COVID, that really changed. And now we have a lot of folks who are getting funding, but who have never managed these funds before. So we're in very much the same boat of us having to talk to stakeholders about the fact that it's not just about getting the money. The bigger piece of the pie is really managing the money over the long term, and that you should invest in that and plan for that on the front end, and not as we have this money, now what? And so I think that's where a role of great consultants come in to help guide that process, but also, just us in the field talking to stakeholders about what that looks like.
Great, thank you. So now we're going to open the floor for participants. We have about 9 minutes to the end of the session. So please, if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand. If you go to reactions, you see that, just raise your hand and we'll call you. So Joseph, do you want to start up?
Hi, Roland. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to be moderating the Q&A session. We have, before we start calling people from the audience, we actually have a question from Ifua Ansa, and her question is with regards to youth empowerment. Now, she wants to know what has been put in place for the youth who are hardworking but don't necessarily meet the educational requirements. That's the first class and the second class upper as a time of application to be an intern. Now she wants to know what opportunities have been put in place for them to actually, make something out of themselves without cutting short their capabilities. Yeah. So I don't know if you can take this question.
So I guess if this coming from, you know, entrepreneurship perspective, I think I'll pass it on to Kosi, because she's looking at the MSME, SME. But then if it's from an entrepreneurial side, I think she needs to first start off with something. If she thinks she needs to, you know, get herself involved in any particular engagement where she thinks then funding will be required. I know there's NIP, the National Entrepreneurship Program, which kind of gives funding to startups. Again, it depends on the idea that she's trying to put across. You need to also understand that wherever you're going to seek funding, you need to understand the impact that that particular funder is looking for, and to make sure that your business idea that you're going to put on paper will reflect that. But I don't know if that's the answer she's looking for. But again, I don't know if Kosi wants to add anything to that, because clearly there's somebody who is saying, well, I don't think I made the grade, but what are other opportunities are there for me? Okay, I think we can ask the next person.
Okay, I'll call on Solomon Odonko, our policy analyst. Please, you have the floor to speak.
Hello, thank you very much, Roland and the team of panelists. My first question will go to Ms. Kosi Yankiaye. In your presentation, you did make mention of the fact that transparency is a key requirement of a beneficiary target of grants. I do remember some work done by the World Bank, IFC, and the Health for Africa initiative. There was a survey done in Ghana, Nigeria, and Cameroon, and the fundamental aspect of transparency for targets, beneficiaries, was record keeping. So I want to find out, how well are you building the capacities of MSMEs who are being beneficiary targets of grants to enhance their record keeping that will also promote their accountability?
So I think we're doing a lot. I mean, even to take the first question that came on that we're answering, we constantly have over 100 programs running each day across the district. We have 209 offices in the nation. We have 37 of business resource centers, which are one-stop shop for business development. We're the most decentralized business development service providers in the nation. And all because we want to take these services and support to help people build their capacity and their businesses at the district level without them having to come into the regional capitals. So as much as possible, there's a lot happening. And with a question also with regards to the, are we looking for first class upper and second class upper? I mean, I think it's important for people to seek a lot of the programs that are put out there and really understand the concept. Because I don't think it's a first class or a second class upper that makes an entrepreneur. As much as possible, the work and the documents we put out there is for youth. So if you find yourself within the category and you actually have an idea and you go through the process and you have your documentation and information, then you are able to get on board and be a part of it. So I think one of the major challenges is information, dissemination of information, understanding of the information, and as much as possible, we need to share more information. And it's important for people to also pay attention to what kind of information so that they don't miss out on what we're trying to achieve, don't miss out on even building themselves, because there's no requirement that limits by what your age limit is, what your degree is, all of that. But we've done a whole lot in building the capacity of these SMEs, and that's what we will continue to do through the records keeping, through financial literacy to support the businesses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then we, yeah.
Okay, so we'll call on Awoke. Awoke, you have a minute. Please ask your question, and then we can quickly wrap up. We want to finish before 3. So Awoke, please, your question. Okay, so if Awoke is not going to speak, I'm just going to remind everybody on the call that our channel is open on YouTube. So this session that has been recorded will be uploaded. You can access it by tomorrow. And we'll be putting out thought leadership and material on our social media platforms and then in print media. So you should be expecting information from Deloitte concerning grant management at later dates. Yeah, so Roland, please, your closing address.
So I think it's been a wonderful 2 hours well spent. As Ms. Kosi kept on talking about, delivering on time, we're also trying to make sure that we get our grants management program, being the first edition, to also end on time, sticking to our words. So let me first thank the wonderful panelists, Mrs. Kosi, Dr. Tunji, I think so I call him Tunji for short. Benjamin, great, fantastic presentation from everybody. Tip, we are most grateful as we've had you on board, and we definitely look forward to our major program, which I'm sure the team in Deloitte will keep everybody posted, because we are seeking to host one of the biggest grants management programs in Ghana, and we'll keep you posted on that particular program, which of course will be a yearly program where we'll try to bring a lot of people into one room for us to discuss grants management and the future and how we make it work. So thanks once again to the panelists. Thanks to everybody who has, stayed with us throughout the entire session, and those who could not and have left. But we say thanks so much. We hope you're gonna go back with something meaningful. You're gonna go back with something that adds additional knowledge to what you already have. And we are always hoping to take any feedback that you might have for it. So thanks so much and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you.
This is Deloitte Ghana. By building on Deloitte core purpose of making an impact that matters, we are a leader